Hey everyone, Dale Thrush with By Design Advisors. Back on the whiteboard today because I wanted to address something I get asked all the time when working with clients, even with my friends, is how to hire, right? Everyone's struggling to find good people. I hear it all the time. It's just impossible to find good people. Newsflash, no it's not. If you design your process, you know what you're doing, it's not hard. I will argue it's never been easier, but most people mess up on the very first step of the whole hiring process. So today, I just want to go over the 5 steps to hiring superstar talent, right? What are those 5 basic things you need to do before you even, think about hiring somebody? Step 1, we have to define our fish. And you might be saying, what the heck is a fish? And it's because I like to use an analogy in recruiting of we're going fishing, right? We want to go find the best fish we can find in the ocean. What most companies do is they get in their boat, go out, cast the net, come back 2 weeks later, scoop up the net, and whatever fish is in there, that's who they choose from. That's not what I mean by going fishing. When you define your fish, the first thing you want to do is define the KRAs for that position, right? What are they going to be key responsibility areas? What impacts do we want them to have? What behaviors do they need, right? We got to define this before we even get into the daily task and all of that stuff. So let's say you want to hire a receptionist, let's say. The responsibility areas, the impacts, and the behaviors could be completely different depending on what you want that receptionist to do, right? There could be a receptionist if you're in a call center that's just answering phones, 300 calls a day, right? So their key responsibility area is just going to be answer as many calls. The impacts we want them to have is maybe we turn 10% of those into sales, whatever. And the behaviors we need are, friendly professional phone voice, and that's it. We could be a doctor's office, right? Where their key responsibility areas are going to be HIPAA requirements, paperwork, filing, patient care, patient coordination, appointment setting, right? Our impacts. We want them to improve our patient's experience with our office. And our behaviors, have to be friendly, have to be customer service oriented, have to be professional, all that. So we need to define that before we even start to look for who we're going to hire. So that's defining your fish. What do you do next? Well, ID your bait. So what do I mean by that? We're not going to go out in the ocean and try to catch every kind of fish. Once we define this, we're trying to catch one type of fish, right? So we need to ID our bait. How do we do that? The first thing you need to do is define your working genius and DISC profile for that position, right? Going back to the receptionist, the 2 different receptionists we talked about here are going to require 2 different working genius, 2 different DISC profiles. So we need to define what the working genius and DISC profile that we prefer for this role. The other thing you have to do, what is your organization's EVP? For those that don't know what EVP is, that's just your employee value proposition. If you had a superstar receptionist and she was choosing between your office and 3 other offices, why should he or she come work for you? That's your employee value proposition. This could be because we're the highest paying. It could be we have the best benefits. It could be we have the best culture, right? But you have to be able to define that, and you have to be able to talk to your candidates about it. The third step, and this is where a lot of folks mess up as well, is an intentional interview process. And what do I mean by intentional? It means defining how many interviews we're going to do, who's going to do those interviews, what each person is interviewing for, not the candidate. So again, let me give you an example of an intentional interview. At Advoco, we basically had a half-day interview process, right? This is after we defined our fish, it's after we ID'd our bait. This is when we were actually ready to bring people in. They would come in for a half day, 4 to 5 hours on site. And we did 45-minute interviews, not panel interviews. We had 6, 7 people that were designated to do interviews, 45-minute increments, and they were interviewing for a specific thing. So our tech delivery lead, they might be assessing just the technical aptitude of the candidate. So they spend 45 minutes diving into the tech stuff that I don't know anything about. Our trainer would interview, and she was strictly interviewing for learning aptitude and how they learn and could they learn it. She was purely assessing them on if they could learn the system. I would be involved. I was more that culture fit, personality fit, working genius disc fit, right? Making sure that they're going to fit into the broader team, the broader organization. Marty or Steve would do the final interview. And that's just really, do they like the person, that just so they could get to know them, right? So we're all interviewing for a very specific thing. Why did we do that? It's because you don't want the interviews to be the same. You don't want the person getting the same questions over and over and over again with just the person in the chair, right? So by tech, if you're interviewing for tech skills, you're asking technical related stuff, right? Learning stuff, you're asking how do they learn? How do they prefer to learn? What have they learned? As a culture fit, I'm asking more of those behavioral type questions. So they're getting a different interview with every person. It's hard to fake it for 5 hours, right? If you just do one person interview for an hour, good luck, right? So that's step 3. Step 4, what's your feedback process? And this is very important because this can be influenced, right? Don't have those same 6 people that just did the interview all get in a room and say, what'd you think? Because what one person says could impact what somebody else thinks, right? You want them to send you their feedback individually, right after their interview when it's fresh. That could be a scorecard, that could be a recap sheet, whatever you come up with. Have them send it to you individually. And then once you have everybody's individual feedback, get together as a group, talk about it. All right, who's in favor of hiring, who's not, why? And what that allows you to do is hold people accountable if they change their mind, which is fine if they change their mind for a good reason because of somebody else's feedback. But what you don't want is Sally to be like, oh, that person was great. And then she gets to the group process and she hears Craig say they're awful, and all of a sudden Sally's like, you know what, yeah, never mind, I think they're awful too. Okay, why? Why'd you change your mind, right? So you have to have that formal feedback process. Then the last step, and the very last step, is when you get into the salary negotiations. Our hiring philosophy at Advoca was we want the right person with the right skills at the right price, right? And what you're doing here is you're trying to weed out those folks that just want the money versus those folks that want the actual opportunity. You should be selling opportunity, not salary. And you're going to lose some folks, right? Somebody's going to say, I want $100,000. That's not the right person with the right skills at the right price. We're going to let them go, right? We want the people that truly want the opportunity. So that's my 5-step guide. Define your fish, ID your bait, be intentional about your interview process, have a good, robust feedback process, and then at the end of the day, make sure you're hiring for folks that want the opportunity, not the money.